I used to carry a 9mm all the time. A little bit of failure is what makes you stronger. Recycle your pain. You can't just say, okay, let's pull up my bootstraps and let's do this. I wanted more. I wanted more. I needed more. I needed to be successful for myself. Fear is manifested in our minds. Good evening. I'm Scott Binsack, and thank you for joining me. Tonight, I'm going to be discussing the black sheep, growing up dysfunctional. You're going to need to strap yourselves in for this show, because I'm going to be discussing some of the darker elements of life and being a survivor of a dysfunctional family, as well as the psychological issues that go with it. Psychological issues that I've studied for many years of my life and have to deal with still every day from growing up dysfunctional. I believe another person's dysfunction should never become your reality. Dealing with families who are dysfunctional is a tough matter. And most families have dark secrets. Don't kid yourself. They're there. From the outside, they look perfect, but on the inside, they're really not. They're really not. Growing up dysfunctional affects you the rest of your life. What mom and dad show you and expose you to, as well as any of the other family members related thereto, is how you're going to develop. They say the most important years are from 0 to 6. My 0 to 6 was horrible, and from 6 to 15 was even worse. Before I get into what happened to me, let's get into what the black sheep means in the family. Families, you have to remember, are tribal, first off. And it's true. We're human species. We come from tribes. And in tribes, it used to be, as people would seek, well, they still do, you seek the love and the approval of your family. You seek their help when you're in need. But when you grow up with a dysfunctional tribe, those needs are not met. Most people believe, and I'm looking at my notes here because I have a lot to cover tonight. I believe whatever is repressed will eventually come out, as do most psychological studies. In other words, what you repress and take in and don't deal with eventually will show its ugly head in your life in some way, form, or fashion. There's a saying that everybody says, your family wants what's best for you. That's not true. Your family doesn't want what's best for you. And it's a proven fact. Families want what's best for them. And I don't mean protecting your children or keeping them from crossing the road, and I'm talking about adults here as well, not just children when I discuss this show. Well, my family wants the best for me. Really. Most families, 9 out of 10, want what's best for them, not you, especially in a dysfunctional family. They seek out to project onto you their own issues. Philip Larkin put it best. Parents will actually project their weaknesses onto their children. Parents will actually project their weaknesses onto their children. In other words, their issues will be projected onto their children. Think about it. It has to. Because if you have issues that you're dealing with, how could you not project them on to your children? And most people don't want to face their issues. It's a tough thing to face your issues. That includes parents, siblings. Nobody wants to. Most people don't want to face their issues. They like to project their issues onto others. It makes them feel better. Same goes for a dysfunctional family. Those family members don't want to see you succeed. Those family members don't want you to be better than they are. They hate you. Family members will come to hate you. Maybe not in all aspects, but they'll hate you. And if you think about it, you'll see what I mean. Oh, this is what's best for you. You know, you do this, you do that. No, they just don't want you to see you succeed. 9 out of 10. And these are proven statistics. In other words, mom and dad and siblings fuck us up. There's no better way to put it, and Philip Larkin put it the same way. Mom and dad fuck you up. Sorry if you don't like the word fuck, but I use it a lot. And it's just a word. I hear people all the time say, oh, you can't say that. Listen, if people would worry more about what goes on in their own lives and themselves and in the world, instead of the word fuck, we'd be better off. Anyway, back to the dysfunctional family. In other words, parents and siblings will project their weaknesses onto others to make them feel good. We all do it, some more than others. If we have unresolved issues, if we don't want to take the time to resolve our issues and look deep within ourselves. The term scapegoating, it means, I'm going to give you the textbook definition of what scapegoating means, aka black sheep, is when one member of a family is picked out of the rest by the rest to project their issues on, the blame on, the guilt on. It's your fault that I did this. It's his fault that I did this. It's her fault that I did this. You caused this. You caused that. And it comes in a mob type fashion from a family. Scapegoating. And in Europe, they have the term mobbing. What that means is people feel good. Have you ever seen that where somebody's getting, and I'm sure you've seen videos on YouTube or wherever, where somebody's getting injured or somebody's being bullied and picked on, everybody else is there laughing and having a good time. It's a mobbing. It makes others feel good about themselves when they see somebody else being taunted or abused. It's very serious stuff. And a lot of people don't like to face that in themselves at all. And this is an ugly truth, I'm telling you. Your family does not want what's best for you. I'm going to say it again. In 9 out of 10 cases. So scapegoating is where the family picks out, and they do it subconsciously, they'll pick out a member of the family, and usually it's the member who's the most emotional, the deepest, maybe even artistic, things like that. And they pick out this member to scapegoat, use them as, I did this for this, it's his fault, it's her fault, as I said, aka the black sheep of the family. I was the black sheep of my family as the second oldest grandson in my father's family. I have no siblings, no brothers or sisters. I'm an only child. This family, my father's family, was so dysfunctional that the horrors that were inflicted, not just on me, but other family members, and then by each of them on each other, were catastrophic. Catastrophic. to the point where at times as a child I wanted to die. The events from this dysfunction, and they are severely dysfunctional and still to this day. Some of them are dead, deceased, and I see it every day still in others' families. And, I have to do this because my mom, the guilt that people feel that they have to do this for their parents, or they have to do this because their sister or brother says something to them. They don't really want what's best for you. I'm telling you this. And then 9 out of 10, and this is a proven fact, proven psychological fact, they don't. Most families are sick. Gregory Bison was a famous psychologist. He did tons of studies. And I'm not, into all this psychobabble stuff, but I had to seek out the answers over the years for the dysfunction I grew up with, and I used to say, "Why me?" as a child, and then in my early 20s. And when I saw that this dysfunction was now showing its face in my own life, my own relationships, friendships, marriage, etc., it became an obsession with me to really find out why. Was it really, because I always felt it was my fault that I was abused sexually, physically, mentally, emotionally, to the point where it affected me. And I thought I repressed it all. And as I said, what is repressed will eventually come out. Don't kid yourself. You have to face these issues of growing up, and even as an adult, even still dealing with an abusive, dysfunctional family. As I was back to is about Gregory Bison, is that families are sick most of the time. In other words, the group is sick. Everybody has some type of mental illness, or everybody has some type of flaw. But in a family circumstance, a lot of that gets passed down to generations, and it keeps going and following. And then one person usually absorbs it, as I'm saying, in the scapegoating avenue, the black sheep. However, in my case, I didn't take it. It was only to a point that I finally couldn't take it anymore, where others will continue to take it. I had to go. I had to leave. I think it was 15 and a half, 16, whatever it was. I had to go at all costs. And it was just a switch went off inside of me. Your family wants you to become what's best for them, not for you. And this show I'm doing is because recently somebody had come to me on Facebook and said, "Your family hates you." And they were throwing it at me like, "Oh, that's going to hurt me." Really? My family hates me? And the other part of it was, they disowned you. Let's look at this picture. Fact. I left home at 15 and a half, 16, and never looked back. I disowned them. And they still, as it is with this dysfunction of families, they still, to this day, and I'm 45 years old, attempt to wreak and rain down havoc on my life and get others to not like me as well. They're obsessed, some of them. And this is my father's brothers and sisters, and a couple of my cousins. But really, the rest, there is no more. My mother is dead, and I'm talking about my father's side of the family. My mother's side of the family was severe alcoholism. So, as well as my father's side, and I'm going to get into that, the alcoholism is, as I said, it's dysfunction everywhere, and that trickles down as well. Alcoholism is a disease. But I had to come to grips with this, because even recently, I saw it the cycle showing its ugly head in how I was communicating with someone and showing my emotions and my anger at times. And I'm not an angry man. Do I have a lot of probably still repressed anger from a dysfunctional family? Sure. I have tried to face it, forgive, and get on with it in my life, and I've done very well at it. I could have been Charles Manson. Instead, I turned out to be I'm the black sheep. I turned out to be the one that has the great heart and the wanted to please everybody and make everybody happy. And that's part of being abused as a child and coming from a dysfunctional family. You want to be perfect. You want to be perfect. You want to make everybody happy. You don't want anybody to think badly about yourself, about you. And one of the best things I ever learned was that to be real, and that's my saying, and that's the name of my book, Staying Real. To be real was to be yourself, no matter what anyone else thought. Especially when I set boundaries with my family, within myself, and I'll get into that at the end of the show, the steps, things that you can do to help yourself deal with a dysfunctional family and the issues that may have come from that, or if you're still dealing with them. Me, I won't deal with them. But anyway, this person came to me, your family hates you, they disowned you. No, I disowned them. And as I said, your family doesn't want what's best for you 9 out of 10 times. And I don't mean what you eat growing up or things. I'm talking about it's very far and few where somebody wants to see you do better than they do. Especially even parents, especially since over the past 40 years, how families have changed and there's not stay-at-home moms anymore so much and that type of situation. Between 0 to 6 is a child's most important years with their mother, the mother figure. And I had issues with my mom, serious issues with my mom that involved my father's family. Some of them I've gone into some other shows. And my mother would be a mother when she wanted to. My mother was also a severe alcoholic, as was my grandmother, my father's mother. And as there is severe alcoholism in my father's family, his brothers and uncles and you name it. A lot of alcoholism, a lot of drug use. You see, because most of them were self-helping themselves or trying to ease their own pain and having to deal with this dysfunction. My father's family could have taken on the world, the intelligence that they had, and but they decided to kill each other, in other words, and hate each other all along the way. Jealousy, hatred, the pain that was inflicted. I can remember every holiday function. Everybody had to be drunk. There was always drugs going around. And this was a very highly reputable family to the public on Long Island. On the outside, they were the most successful business in town, and you know, the kids were all in Catholic school, and everything looked on the outside like perfect. When in reality, it wasn't perfect. And I can remember the first time I was, and I remember it clearly. I think I was 2.5, 3 years old. There was a family function, and I had been called upstairs by my father's brother, my youngest father's brother. And I don't care, I'm saying his name's Peter. And he's now a convicted child molester on Megan's list. Finally, some years ago, he was convicted. But back then, and I want to make something clear here, everybody thinks that because their family did something, that makes them the same way. That's so far from the truth. We're all individuals. Just because we have the same blood of a family member running through you doesn't make you them. Doesn't make you the dysfunction. And people seem to confuse that. Oh, they did that, so you're part of that family? Really? Not true. I left this family at 15 and a half. They continued to do their dysfunction and went on and on and on. And I stepped out of the box, and thank God I did when I did, because I don't think if I didn't leave when I did, I would have been dead either by my own hand or by one of my uncles. So anyway, I can remember coming down the stairs. I remember this distinctly, or being brought down the stairs, I should say. And I went to my mom and I said that my Uncle Peter had touched me. And my father was there. My father's an ex-Nassau County police officer. My father's the oldest of 7 of this dysfunctional clan. There were 7 children. And my mother and my father confronted him, and he made up a story and said, I made it up. And now I'm a 2.5, 3-year-old child. But I don't know how I remember this, but I do. And then I remember thereafter it happening all the time. How dirty and disgusting I felt. And no one would listen because the dysfunction was rampant in that house. One brother was molesting the other brother, and one sister was molesting the other brother. Crazy, horrible things. And as time went on, and part of this is growing up, as I said, my grandmother was an alcoholic. I can remember a Christmas when I was young. The family had chipped in and got her a new couch. And they lived in this very large home in Long Island. They got her a couch for Christmas, and I happened to be there that Christmas morning. And when everybody came downstairs, she had taken a knife, a butcher knife, and sliced this couch to death because she didn't want a couch and she was drunk. Serious dysfunctional drunk. Very violent drunk as well. I can remember as a little coming home. I ended up living at my grandmother's house when my parents separated, and through this madness of a child that I had. I was in almost 15 different schools by the time I quit school at the end of 8th grade. From moving all over the place with different family members, my parents, my mother. It was havoc. Complete havoc. And I remember coming home, and I had a friend with me from school, and my grandmother was there, and she had opened the window from the kitchen as we were walking up to the house because you could see out. She said, I have a butcher knife for both of you. I'm going to kill you. I was so embarrassed. I was so embarrassed. And as a little boy, I was frightened because it wasn't just sexual abuse. It was physical abuse as well. My dad was also very physically abusive to my mother. I witnessed that as well. And then as time went on, my, I'm going to say alleged godfather, here's my godfather, he's deceased now, he killed himself. This man was beyond sick, beyond dysfunctional. And he was the biggest abuser to me out of all the family members. To where he sexually and physically abused me, as well as mentally and emotionally abused me up until the time I left home at 15 and a half, 16. And somewhere along the way, my mother gave him custody. And I have the documents to prove this. And family members will be like, oh, this isn't true. I have all the documentation. I even have tapes to prove what I'm telling you. Nor do I care. This is my story, and I'm sticking to it. And I wouldn't come and tell the world these things. I just wouldn't. This is the truth, and I want to help others so they can understand. Because growing up in a dysfunctional family will affect you the rest of your life if you allow it to. And it will in some avenues, always. But it can also make you stronger and it's made me who the man I am today. And this man abused me to the point of he gave me cocaine at age 5 and started and continued then until I left home as well. Constant sexual abuse, constant physical abuse, constant mental abuse. And my mother used to bring him around, and I couldn't figure it out as a child. He was always, when I was younger, I couldn't figure it out. And I used to always see my family members, they would sleep with other people constantly. One would sleep with the other one's wife, and this one, dysfunction out of the story. And I'm writing a book, and it's almost done. People are like, oh, when are you going to finish that book? It's very trying to write this book because madness took place. But I have to tell the story. And my mother would invite him to, he would get divorced. He got a divorce from his wife, and he was a functioning businessman, but sucking down 2 bottles of Stoli a day and an 8-ball of cocaine, as well as suffering from severe pedophilia. Obsessed with little boys. Particularly obsessed with me. I mean, severely obsessed with me. To the point it was sickening. To the point where at one point I even proved with authorities what he did to me at a hotel on Long Island as a little boy called Comac Motoring. And it's on file with the Suffolk County Police Department. It can be verified. He was arrested. But because of the connections of my family and the size of who they knew, and my great uncle being a judge, they squashed it and basically gave him, they found him guilty, but at that time they gave him a year psychiatric, go to see a psychiatrist, etc., whatever. He blew that off too, go there high. And even after he was convicted of this, my mother signed over custody to him of me in her drunken stupor. And my mother was the type of mom that was there when she wanted to be. And if not, she wasn't there. And I remember my dad telling me this growing up about my mom, and I never wanted to believe it. I thought she would say my dad was lying and lying and lying. Then my mother showed her own colors, and I figured it out as I went along. But this man abused me severely. The things I've seen and what I've experienced would make your stomach turn. Being physically raped on a regular basis. As well as given cocaine and exposed to just madness, complete madness. And I'm going to share something tonight I've never really told anybody. That only a select few know. My mother's dead, so but I have the documents to prove it. I couldn't figure out what my connection was to this man who abused me with my mother. And I would be up all night for days on cocaine, hiding under beds, being chased, physically beaten, locked in rooms, continually molested, locked in rooms and hidden away. There was no childhood for me. And somehow through it all, and then I had to deal with my mother, the alcohol. Then my father, the chief of dysfunction of his family, I had to deal with his issues as well. The only light in all of this was my mother's parents, my grandparents, who actually sort of became like my parents. They were very good people, but they also suffered with their own issues from, as I said, their parents. My grandmother's grandfather was a severe alcoholic and depression, things like that. But nothing. And nobody wanted to believe this about this family. That my father, nobody wanted to believe this. Even to this day, there's some people that'll watch this and go, no way. Yes. And I know where it stemmed from. As I said, it comes, my grandfather was a key part of the dysfunction. And I believe molested his own children because he attempted several times to molest me. It was madness, a chaos, honest to God, chaos. When I tell you, it's the most, and how I survived it, I don't know. It was a miracle in itself. And to share that with people, to tell them was a difficult thing, not anymore for me. I'm not ashamed of anything, and you should never be ashamed of who your family is, because it's not you. It will become you if you allow it. If you allow them to use you as the scapegoat and the black sheep, even as you get older, and don't set boundaries for yourself against this and separate yourself, it will continue, and it will continue to affect you. And what our parents have shown us and what they project on us is their own issues. And we all do it as parents. I have done it as parents. And it could be good issues. I'm not saying it's just bad, but whatever their issues are, they will project it onto you, onto their children. It has to happen, because how they function will go on to them. So their own issues of not dealing with things, if you don't deal with them, will project onto others. And if you as I said, everything repressed has to show its face. It has to come out. So it can come out in anger, depression, guilt, pain, how you deal with somebody when they say something to you. And I know I've gone through them all. I've experienced them all. And recently I found myself actually repressed. There's a psychological term of, it's called the slow drip effect. And what that means is that you're with somebody and you're around somebody, and what they do will slowly trickle down to you. And it slowly drips into your life and slowly affects you and slowly changes you. And it will bring out even your own issues to support theirs. If you allow it to, if you don't set boundaries with them and don't show them that this is enough. You can't verbally abuse me. You can't physically abuse me. You can't, I'm just using these examples. You can't do these things. You can't use me, because then you're basically, you are codependent. You're becoming, codependent to them and their issues. That's where the dysfunctional family will become codependent to your family members if you allow them to treat you a certain way. Or if you don't separate yourself from them, you're actually feeling like, oh, like I said to you, oh, this is what's best for you. And the minute you start to be more successful than them or do that, they'll say, no, don't do that, or don't date him, or don't be with this person, or don't do that. Don't take on that career. Don't go to school. I see it all the time, and I suffer. They told me I was going to be nothing. They told me I was going to be nothing. And you know, I left home, I will say 16, lived in my car, as I've discussed. And from there, by 18, I opened my own construction company. I was working construction for 3 years. And I repressed that. I used that pain as my energy, as my determination. And was a self-made millionaire by 23 and very successful. However, these horrors affected, I got married for the wrong reasons. I thought being married with the children in the house and all of these things would be the perfect family. That's the way it's supposed to be. And I ended up marrying somebody who was just as dysfunctional, and wanting to please them and help them and change them, and wanting to save the world, because as an abused child and coming from a dysfunctional family, we want to be perfect. We want to help everyone else, and that's how we get our own satisfactions. When in reality, you have to love yourself, and you have to do for you. And the minute I learned, and it took me almost 35 years, learned how to stay real, be real, me, and be me, and not worry about what anybody else thinks, just like I'm telling you about my life and my family. I'm not ashamed. They may be ashamed. I'm not ashamed. And they couldn't have disowned me because I disowned them. And years later, and part of this, when I became successful, some of them came knocking on my door. Believe it? Of course. They came knocking on my door. Wanted to be around me because I was so successful. Wanted to be a part of the posse, the crew, the part of the whole limelight. Even borrowed money from me. But underneath, there was still that backstabbing, hating people. And they're there. And I'm looking at you. The hatred that they have, the jealousy that they have. Because, think about this, if they really started to like you, then they'd have to look at their own issues. It's the only way. It's the only way. So, this man that abused me, and I apologize for the sound of my computer here. I thought the volume was off. So, this man who abused me, my godfather, his name was Chris. And my uncle, my father's youngest brother, Peter, also abused me. I even got abused by my aunts. 2 of them. Serious. So I've been abused by female and male. It was everywhere. Because they were abused, because they were dysfunctional. And most of them still are today. They just have projected their issues and keep projecting them on others and keep traveling around and moving around from relationship to marriage to this to that, and they still haven't figured it out. Because they won't figure it out. Most don't. Most don't change unless they're forced to. So this man, and I can remember this man rented an apartment in Westbury, and it was above, and he didn't even had a beautiful big house somewhere else, getting divorced in Huntington, and he was very wealthy man. My family's business was very successful. So I I rented this apartment, and he had custody of me. He actually got temporary custody of me because my mom signed over. And I remember finding the document years later. What my mother did, shocking, when I was cleaning out her garage. And he would keep me locked in this apartment upstairs, feeding me cocaine and abusing me. And forcing himself on me. And it was not, and as I got older, and I look back on this, as I talked to some of the other things, I had many people that wanted to kill this man. I wanted to kill him myself. But I never had that in me to now if somebody did it to my own child, I would kill them. No questions asked, and I would let a jury figure it out as temporary insanity. So, but this man, and there was some times it came close, I wanted to kill him as a kid. I was going to kill him. I had no other choice sometimes to fighting for my life. And he'd keep me locked up there, and he abused me, and the cocaine and the alcohol and the sexual, oh my God. Urinating on bathtubs. The madness. The madness. This man was mad. Very mad. So, one time in his drunken high stupors, he told me, he said, "I'm your real father." I almost, what? He said, "I'm your real father." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he tells me this crazy story. Crazy story. And I'm like, no. And the story he tells me is that when he was 14 years old, that he slept with my mom and had a serious affair with my mother. And my mom couldn't get pregnant before that, and she was married to my father only a couple of years. I think it was 3 years. And I mean, that's abuse itself. And then my mom became pregnant. And then if I looked at everything at this time, even when he told me this, I was putting all the pieces together, how she was always allowing him at the house and doing these things. And I saw my mother sleeping with this man. At the same time when he was done sleeping with my mother, he would come out and abuse me. Serious stuff. Serious stuff. And I started putting two and two together, and I confronted my mom at a younger age. She denied it and denied it and denied it and denied it. And my mother was always living in denial. My mother was always drunk. My mother was always intoxicated. Functioning alcoholic. Beautiful woman, you never really know. She was a serious alcoholic and had many men in her life. Many men in her life. Whereas my father was the opposite. He didn't really have many women in his life. He remarried, and that's a whole other story. But my stepmother that I got abused by, it was like as a kid I was labeled and had abused me on my head. And it's the scapegoating. It's the scapegoating in this family. I was the black sheep. I was the one that people threw all there. Until I left. And when I left, they couldn't do anything anymore to me. They couldn't harm me anymore. And it was the best thing I ever did. So he tells me this bizarre story, and later I confront my mom with it, and she lives in denial. And then after I think I was 20 years old, I was married. I got married at a young age, and I've talked about it on other shows. I got married because I thought the girl I met had gotten pregnant. She said she was pregnant, and when in fact it wasn't. I found out years later it wasn't my child. So, and again, I brought this woman into my life from the dysfunction I grew up with. And I attracted that, trying to, we emanate our dysfunctions if we don't face our issues. And I was forced over the years to face my issues, and I welcomed them, to believe it or not. I wanted to face my issues, and that's part of healing from this and learning to deal with a dysfunctional family. No matter what dysfunction it is that you have to educate yourself and do your homework, and don't be afraid to say, you know what, I'm the way I am. It's not your fault. That's another thing. It's not your fault. It truly isn't your fault if you're raised in a dysfunctional family. And most of them are. Most of them are. And so, but again, it's not your fault. And years later, here I am cleaning out my mom's garage, and I go into a filing cabinet. I saw they're locked, and I see some files, and I'm opening the drawers. It was a big, tall one of those old industrial type filing cabinet. And I find these documents, and it says Chris's name on it and my name, and it goes to the whole thing. And there was custody papers in there where she signed over custody because she was involved with some man and she was going to get remarried again. And my mom was remarried a few times. My mom went through men like I go through socks. And I'll admit it, my mom went through men like she was very dysfunctional. And I used to hate that about my mom. I was embarrassed. Men would come over to the house, I'd be introduced, and years later they'd even come to my house, and I'd be like, they would tell me all these wonderful things about my mom, and I'm like, my man, you're not the only man. You're not the only man. What? What do you mean? Well, it's the truth. And I always saw the difference between, it's kind of weird, I can't explain it. I always saw, even growing up through all of this trauma and all this dysfunction, I always sort of saw what was right and not wrong. And that's why with things that happened to me later on in my life, like 20 years later, some things that happened to me, another story I'm going to be telling, it doesn't fit me. I'm a person who doesn't want anything from anybody. I don't take anything from anybody. Even though people would like to project that at times. I'm a giver, not a taker. And as I said, people's dysfunction, they like to throw that out on you, on us. And it's a vicious cycle. It's bad. And you have to break that cycle. And I'm going on 42 minutes here, so I don't want to go too long. So I found these documents, and sure enough, I went in with the documents and I confronted my mom. She finally admitted to me that this man was my real father. And that the man I knew as my dad wasn't my father. And that this madman who was abusing me all these years was my dad. It was one of the most, and I always, like I said, through the years, it was always mentioned and thrown out there by certain people in the family, as well as Chris, as well as, the abuser, as well as Peter, other people. And it's kind of funny. Peter, all those years he abused me, and they said, "Oh, he's not doing. There's nothing wrong with him. He's the one that's convicted on Megan's list." Karma's a bitch. I don't believe child molesters should even be spared, if you want my honest opinion. And I have no faith in our justice system. I've been a product of that too. No faith. And after that, and I confronted my mom, she told me I never looked at my mother the same way again. But who was I to pass judgment on my mom? None of us should pass judgment on anyone, but yet we find ourselves doing a lot in life. And it's our way of hiding our own issues, and making ourselves feel good about our own issues that we can't face ourselves. And I remember years later, I had to see this man when I had to bury my mother. And I saw him for the first time in a very long time. And how I overcame this pain was, as I've tried to explain before, you turn your pain into fuel. You turn it into fuel for personal success. and you can do it. But the most important part is you have to forgive these people. I've heard, oh, I can't do that. That's not good. It is the key to all of this. No matter what anybody has done to you, you have to forgive them inside of yourself. Not for them, for you. For you, or that madness will continue. I don't care where you file it in your brain. You have to forgive. Never forget it, but you have to forgive and understand it's not your fault if you're growing up in a dysfunctional family and if you've been physically, sexually, mentally, emotionally, because it all goes hand in hand. Or if you're in a marriage even, and a relationship and the other person's dysfunctional and you fall prey to it. You don't have to deal with it. You don't have to put up with it. You don't have to stay. Regardless of if it feels safe or it doesn't feel safe or it is, it doesn't matter what other people think. And until people have walked in your shoes, they will never know. And you owe everyone else, especially your family, you owe no one anything. You owe yourself. You owe yourself to be a better person, to understand your own dysfunctions, to stop the cycle. Because the only way we can, as human beings, stop the dysfunction is to face it ourselves and deal with it and not project it onto our children. And I don't mean, sure, you may have been abused as a child. Of course, I would never abuse my children. And it's proven fact that psychology is garbage. If you've been abused, then people say, I did it because I was abused. No. I could never, ever, ever touch a child. I was so protective. And there's nothing. Because of the dysfunction I was with, my own children, I would never, around one set of family members did I allow my sons. And then later on my daughter. But I would never allow them around that family. So yes, that was a good thing. I was protecting them from, I didn't want them around that family. But at the same time, and I would look at my own children and say, how could somebody, I looked at my son at 3 and 4 and 5, my other son, and how could anybody touch a child or abuse a child? It's madness. It's complete madness. And if it was up to me, I think it's such a madness and how it affects the cycle of the world. Dysfunction from a family affects our entire world because everything is cycled down to the new birth, the new child that comes in. Because as parents and as siblings, we project our own dysfunction down onto them. It's a vicious cycle. And somewhere along the line, we have to stop it. As human beings, we have to stop the dysfunction and come to grips with it. So you can do that. And I want to help people to do that one person at a time, whatever it takes. Because what I suffered, I would never want anyone else to ever suffer. Ever. I just wouldn't. I wouldn't wish it onto my own worst enemies. But it's made me the kind, loving, compassionate, strong man I am. Because I don't take, one of the best things I did is I disowned my family. I walked away from the madness. I worked on myself. And the word you have to do you. And I'm a person with a very high IQ that, thank God, I could understand and common sense come to grips with this. But I hurt a lot of people along the way. Because of the dysfunction that I grew up with. I projected it on others to make myself feel good, and that's what they did to me. And I had to step back and stop that cycle. And I found myself recently doing it again in a situation of defending myself. And I'm not one to defend. I am what I am. I've made mistakes I've done. This is who I am. You don't like it, that's it. But I don't like being told I'm wrong when I didn't do something to hurt someone else. And I didn't. And if I didn't. But I found myself becoming this slowly trickling into this bad, vicious pattern of arguing about things that madness. That's not who I am. That was the dysfunctional kid that left home. And in many years, 20 years, haven't done that. Nor do I want to do that. I'm a happy man, believe it or not. Very happy. I like being me. And it doesn't matter what you or anyone else think of me. You have to be happy with yourself. But the only way to do that is I had to face my own serious issues, and I still do every day. We all will have to do that till the day we die, and that's a key in life. We're here to learn. We're here to be kind and help others. But we're also here not to take any shit from anybody else who is dysfunctional. Thus, some key parts of this. You have to set boundaries in your life with your family members or anyone that is like that is dysfunctional. You have to set boundaries within your own self. You're not going to allow it to be disrespected. You're not going to be allowed to be treated that way. You're not going to take it. You're not going to allow it. And you have to stick to them. Stop trying to please them because they don't want what's best for you 9 out of 10 times. They want what's best for them. You owe them nothing. You owe the world nothing. You owe yourself. And thus then your children and the people you have in your life. And if they're not there, everything seems to feel safe for us, you know? And we don't like change as human beings. We just don't. We get set in our ways, we get set in our homes, we get set in our neighborhoods, and that's why I have a lot of respect for people who, like I did as a child, walked away. I disowned my family. I walked away from my marriage. That was bad. Even though I tried and tried because I had in my mind that image with the rose-colored glasses. And I used to wear rose-colored glasses growing up, thinking this is the way it has to be. This is what it is. You know, you have to be married, you have to have kids, and everything would be okay then. No. No. You shouldn't be with anybody that you truly don't love. And if you don't love yourself, you can't be with anyone else. And you can't love yourself if you're still dealing with dysfunction from your family or how you grew up and the pains that you've suffered, and then the pain that's been caused all the way down the line. Multiple relationships, marriages, jobs, companies. I know, I went through the whole vicious cycle. And every day I still work hard on it. And you will have to yourself. You have to set up boundaries for yourself. It's not your fault. Remember, it's not your fault. You have to set up boundaries in your life and stick to them. It's like the line in the sand. These are my boundaries. You don't like that. And if you have somebody who's dysfunctional in your life now, and they are bringing you down, slowly bringing you down, you're enabling them. You're an enabler. Because that's how they're putting their dysfunction on you. And don't let that become your reality, because if you do, you're just enabling them to keep on the behavior. And it's harming you and making you dysfunctional. You want to also forgive yourself. It's very important you have to forgive yourself. Not them. You have to forgive them, but not them first. You have to forgive yourself. Because we're all made to feel guilty, like it's our fault. And that's what our family wants. You do this, you did that, you did... It's you. I hate you. We hate you. Good. Wonderful. You keep living your miserable life, and I'll keep doing me. There's one thing out of this that I've become is strong and confident and a real man. All the mistakes and all. We all make mistakes. That's key in life. We all fall down. It's part of life. And if anyone tells you differently, they're full of shit. They're full of shit. I tell them, when you're perfect, you let me know. No one's perfect. And part of growing up in dysfunctional families, they said, is trying to be perfect in everything. And I was a perfectionist my entire life, in my job and what I did and pleasing people. I finally stopped that about 10 years ago and slowly have even exited out of my life. But certain things, even with my job, with work, because I like to do good work for anyone, I like to be a perfectionist. And the key to this, I'm going to explain something to you also real quick. We, as human beings, especially coming from dysfunction, we are the hardest on ourselves. The biggest anger we have is towards ourselves, not others. And it's explosive at times. Explosive it can be at times. And it builds up and it builds up and it builds up. But it's at ourselves because we feel we're mad at ourselves, we allowed this, we're not perfect, we didn't do good enough. They're not happy enough, I couldn't please them. Bullshit. You have to please yourself. You have to stand tall for yourself and be strong for yourself and forgive yourself and grow. It's okay. No one's perfect. It's okay to have problems. Everyone has them. It's okay to have issues. Everyone has them. What's not okay is that you don't face them, or that we don't face them. That's the key. Because it just continues the vicious cycle. So part of dealing with this is you have to seek to understand. And if you're watching this, then you are seeking to understand. You have to seek to understand what happened to you and why you feel the way you are if you grew up in a dysfunctional family in any shape or form. You want to continue to seek to understand. You want to continue to read. You want to continue to view videos and from good people that understand this. You want to keep trying to understand it and then act like a therapist to yourself. Believe it or not, it's a key to me. It's actually taught in psychology. Act like a psychologist to yourself. Help yourself. Be the psychologist. Read, understand, admit, this is what I have. Wow, I have those same kind of traits. I did have this. It's okay. It's okay. You're human. You're normal. And the other is, you want to perceive your life as being better. See it. You want to perceive your life being better. You want to perceive your life without having to deal with dysfunctional family members and not owing them anything. Because you're robbing yourself of your life if you don't. You're robbing yourself. And you're robbing others along the way that you're involved with from not letting them be who they really need to be. Because you're depending on one another. And remember one thing, they're not going to change. 99% of people don't. People can change. Believe me, I'm one of them. And I change every day. And a lot of people can change. However, statistically, if you look at people don't want to change and don't change. They don't change. It usually takes something very drastic to change them. Or if you have an open mind and you can admit you're wrong and understand this and forgive yourself in any wrongs that you've done as a result of what's wrong to you, and you really want to change and reach down inside of yourself, you can change. But statistically, it's proven most people don't want to change and won't change. So whatever you do, don't keep feeding the dysfunction. In my book, I'm going to go into almost every shocking detail of what happened to me. And in other shows as I go. And to the person who said to me, your family hates you and they disowned you. No, I disowned them. Don't judge me. Get your facts straight. And if you're out there slipping that stuff and flashing it and throwing it on me, you're pretty dysfunctional yourself. Another person's dysfunction should never become your own reality. My quote. Another person's dysfunction should never become your own reality, because the minute it does, you just robbed yourself of life. And it will trickle down into everything you do and be pushed onto your children. And it's sad because today's society, parents are non-existent to children. And in 65% of the cases, there's some very good parents out there, and God bless you. And it's people who've gotten their own shit together who can be good parents. But don't kid yourself. As a parent, you project your own issues onto your children. Listen to what I'm telling you.
It's not statistic, it's psychologically proven. So yes, I'm the black sheep. I'm proud of it. I am the scapegoat for my father's family. And even one or two people in my mother's family, but there's not many of them left. And there's cousins and everybody who went their own way. They knew the family was dysfunctional too. And there's much more to this story. Shocking parts to this story. I am very grateful that I still have the mind I do and the kind heart that I do. I'm a real man, and I'm going to tell you real whether you like it or not. And that's one thing about me I will never change. And I will admit my mistakes, and I've been wrong about many things. And I'm not perfect, nor do I want to be. That's the key. And nor do I have to please you. I have to please me. And that will then please others around me. And I have the people who don't want to be in your life, fuck them. The people that do will gravitate to you and they will stay by you. So all you have to do is be you. Good night, and God bless.